We love not to be needed, but to find ourselves in the eyes of another. Carl Jung. But what happens when those eyes always look away? Have you ever loved someone like that? Someone who makes you crave every small piece of them, yet retreats the moment you get too close. You've given too much time, energy, patience, only to get fleeting moments of connection in return. And then you realize you've been working twice as hard just to hold on to something that should have been mutual from the start. The dismissive avoidant doesn't hate love. They simply fear that closeness will strip away their freedom or expose wounds they've hidden for years. The problem is, the more you give, the less attached they often become. It sounds counterintuitive, but neuroscience and psychology make it clear. For them to truly bond and fall deeper in love, sometimes you need to give less and ask for more. This isn't about playing power games, it's about shifting how you show up in the relationship. When you're no longer the one carrying all the weight of connection, they are forced to step forward, contribute, and feel important. That's when both bonding hormones, oxytocin and vasopressin, begin working together, creating a connection that is far more sustainable. Today, we're going to explore why giving less and requesting more can be the key to unlocking a dismissive avoidant's heart. And more importantly, how you can do it without losing your authenticity and without falling into a toxic game of emotional push and pull. For many people with an anxious or fearful avoidant attachment style, love often comes with an unspoken fear. If I don't give enough, they'll leave me. This belief drives them to pour all their energy, time, and even sacrifice their own needs to hold on to the relationship. They constantly care, accommodate, and do everything to make the other person comfortable, hoping it will secure stability and safety. But with a dismissive avoidant, the paradox is this: the more they receive without effort, the more their motivation to stay attached often fades. The root cause isn't just personality or relationship habits. It also comes from the brain's biological chemistry. When they receive care and a sense of safety, a dismissive avoidant can produce oxytocin, the hormone that fosters feelings of connection, trust, and closeness. This is why they may initially feel warmth when you give a lot. But oxytocin is only half the story. Long-term bonding also depends on vasopressin, the hormone linked to feeling, I matter, I'm needed, I'm protecting and contributing. Vasopressin doesn't show up easily if the avoidant is only in the receiving role, with no chance to step up, contribute, or feel like they are an essential part of the relationship. Without vasopressin, they may still see you as safe and pleasant to be around, but deep down, there's no compelling drive to invest for the long haul. The connection can stall at comfortable when together instead of wanting to stay and build together. The danger is that this feeling develops quietly. You might still see them talking, being friendly, but the emotional bond slowly weakens. And if you keep giving from a place of fear, this cycle reinforces the false belief that love must be earned through unconditional sacrifice. Breaking that cycle requires a shift in approach. Dial back the overgiving and create space for them to step in, to contribute, to feel needed, and to experience the value they bring to the relationship. Understanding the root problem is only the first step. The hardest and most transformative part lies in changing the way you show up in the relationship. Giving less does not mean becoming cold or withdrawing in silence to punish them. On the contrary, it's a deliberate action that comes from clarity and self-respect. You begin to give selectively, asking yourself before each gesture, am I doing this out of love or out of fear? If the answer leans toward fear, fear of losing them, fear of abandonment, you allow yourself to pause. Alongside dialing back the overgiving, you also allow yourself to receive. This is a skill many people with anxious or fearful avoidant attachment often lack because they've grown used to controlling the relationship by always being the giver. Now, you put your own needs on the table openly, so the other person sees that you're not just an endless source of care, but also a human being with a desire to be met in return. When you do this, something interesting happens. You create space for the dismissive avoidant to step into a role. They rarely experience the role of contributor, protector, and supporter. They're no longer standing on the sidelines, passively receiving care, but are drawn into actively participating in the relationship's growth. At this point, Both bonding hormones start working in tandem. Oxytocin emerges when they feel safe enough to open up because you're no longer clinging but maintaining a space that feels comfortable. Vasopressin is activated when they realize they're important, needed, and have a tangible role in sustaining the connection. This combination creates a completely new kind of motivation. They stay not only because it feels safe, but also because of the pride and meaning the relationship brings to them. You're no longer the only one working to hold the relationship together. They are now actively holding on to you as well. This is the moment when the balance of power and responsibility in the relationship begins to shift. And once you've experienced what it's like to love while still keeping your sense of self, you'll never want to go back to the old way where you gave everything and received so little in return. When you start giving less and asking for more, you're not just changing your behavior, you're changing the entire emotional dynamic within the relationship. And this is where the deeper truth comes to light. People don't just love because their needs are being met. They also love the version of themselves they become when they're with you. If, when they're with you, they feel stronger, more useful, and more respected, this touches directly on one of the most fundamental psychological needs, a sense of meaning and self-worth. It's this need that makes people not just stay in a relationship, but invest more deeply in it. In The Art of Loving, Erich Fromm describes love as a two-way exchange of energy, where each person both gives and is nourished in return. If you only give without receiving, that cycle is broken. One side is constantly depleted, while the other receives without ever experiencing the feeling of, I'm contributing too. When the balance disappears, the vitality of the relationship slowly fades away. For a dismissive avoidant, this mechanism is even more pronounced. When you create opportunities for them to actively contribute, whether it's helping you solve a problem, supporting you in your work, or simply listening when you need to talk, they're not just helping you, they're reaffirming their own role and value in the relationship. And here's the key. Long-term attachment doesn't come simply from a sense of safety. It comes from their willing desire to stay because they love the person they become when they're with you. They see themselves as better, stronger, and more significant because the relationship exists. On the other hand, if you keep operating in the give everything, receive very little mode, you unintentionally remove their chance to experience that feeling. You keep them stuck in the role of a receiver, and in that role, they won't find a strong enough reason to commit long-term. Once you understand this truth, you'll see that giving less is not selfish. It's actually giving both people a fair opportunity to love and be loved, to contribute and be contributed to. And this is the real foundation of a lasting relationship. Once you understand the truth that lasting love comes not only from meeting their needs, but also from them loving the version of themselves they become when they're with you, the next step is to apply the strategy of a securely attached person. This isn't about tricks or manipulation. It's a way of living and loving that allows both people to grow and be nourished. First point, keep giving, but from a place of fullness, not from fear of loss. Securely attached, people don't stop loving, but they love from a stable foundation, a place where their own needs are already cared for. When you give from fullness, you don't need the other person to respond immediately to feel safe. Love becomes a voluntary gift, not an investment you're anxiously waiting to see return. Second point, practice receiving. Give them the chance to care, protect, and contribute. This is especially important with a dismissive avoidant because, as we've discussed, they need to feel significant and necessary. If you're always the one solving every problem and carrying every load, you unintentionally rob them of the opportunity to step in. Let them fix something for you, give you advice when you're uncertain, or simply bring you a coffee while you work. These small moments are powerful in triggering vasopressin, the hormone tied to long-term bonding. Third point, practice active receiving. This isn't about passively waiting. It's about actively requesting what you need, accepting help when it's offered, and showing genuine appreciation when you receive it. For example, instead of silently struggling, you could say, "Could you look over this report for me? I trust your eye for detail." When they help, respond with sincere thanks so they feel their actions have meaning. Fourth point, observe yourself, learn to distinguish when you're giving out of love versus out of fear. Before doing something for them, ask yourself, is this coming from a desire to connect or from fear of losing them? The answer will guide you to adjust your actions and avoid falling into the cycle of overgiving, imbalance, burnout. This strategy both protects your sense of self-worth and activates both oxytocin and vasopressin in them. When you love from fullness, they feel safe enough to open up. When you give them opportunities to contribute, they feel important and needed. And when both of these bonding hormones are active, the relationship not only stabilizes, but also deepens and strengthens over time. Of course, this requires patience. A dismissive avoidant may take longer to adjust their behavior, but what matters more is that you've shifted the way you operate. You're no longer in the position of holding them at all costs. You're building a relationship where both people want to stay. And when you start living and loving this way, you'll notice something remarkable. They begin to change too, not because you've forced them, but because the emotional environment you've created invites them to become a better version of themselves. And if one day they're no longer there, you'll still stand strong because you've learned how to love without losing yourself. From the practical strategies of a securely attached person, we now move into a deeper layer, the philosophy of living and loving, because relationships, at their core, are not just about communication skills or emotional management. They are a reflection of the values and beliefs you carry through life. Stephen Covey, author of The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, once said, relationships are not about two halves coming together to make a whole, but about two whole people walking side by side. This statement shatters a popular but dangerous belief that you need someone else to fill the emptiness within you. In reality, when you enter a relationship with the mindset of I am incomplete and try to compensate by giving unconditionally, you not only place an emotional burden on the other person, but also make yourself vulnerable to dependence. On the other hand, when you come into love as a whole person, you don't need love to survive. You choose to love because you want to create something greater together. Marcus Aurelius, in Meditations, wrote, accept the things to which fate binds you, and love the people with whom fate brings you together, but do so with all your heart. If something is outside your control, let it go. This principle holds true in every area of life, and especially in matters of the heart. You cannot control how they respond or whether they will change. You cannot force them to feel needed by you or compel them to commit simply because you've given so much. But you can fully control the way you love, the boundaries you set, and the way you protect your own heart. When you truly understand this principle, the fear of, if I give less, they will leave, begins to fade, because by then, you know that real love is not sustained by one-sided sacrifice, but by the voluntary exchange between two free individuals. You realize that loving the right way means loving without losing your own identity, without dissolving into the other person's wants or emotions. And here lies a beautiful paradox. It's precisely when you stop trying to hold on to them at all costs, when you love while still granting them freedom, that they are more likely to want to stay. Human beings are drawn to relationships where both their independence and their connection are respected. This philosophy doesn't just change the way you love, it changes who you are. You become calmer, less panicked by silence, less desperate in the face of conflict. You begin to choose relationships based on core values rather than the fear of loss. When you stand in that place, the place of a self-sufficient, whole individual who is ready to love in a healthy way, you will see that every strategy, every tip is merely a tool. The real strength lies in living these principles every day, not just in romantic relationships, but in all relationships, with family, friends, colleagues, and most importantly, with yourself. One day, they might come back with a heart that's ready, or maybe they won't. But when you love with self-respect and clear boundaries, you no longer measure your worth by whether someone stays or leaves. You will know that you don't have to work tirelessly to be loved. Real love will always meet you halfway. And perhaps, as Rumi once said, love is not something you look for, it's something you become. Let this journey shape you into the kind of person who, even when standing alone, is whole, confident, and open to love without ever losing yourself. If you feel this message resonates with you, hit like to help share it with others, and subscribe so we can continue walking this healing path together. There are many more deep conversations ahead, and I don't want you to miss a single one.